Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 5 of In the 11. Today's episode is definitely going to be a good one. Trust me on that. I'm sure based on the title, you kind of get the gist of what the story is that I'm going to be telling today. But this is probably a story that I would say only a handful of people in my life really know from start to finish, with every detail included. And I think it's a good one. So buckle in, grab the popcorn if you want it, and let's get going. So before I get into the story, I just kind of want to put a spotlight real quick on somebody who left a review on the podcast, on Apple Podcasts. So, good friend of mine, Andrew Johnston, wrote, "A better insight into the soccer world than most. I'm always looking forward to the next episode. Brendan does an incredible job of breaking down what it's really like pursuing a career in soccer, as well as not shying away from the highs and lows that come with chasing a dream. Always honest and providing insight that you otherwise wouldn't hear. This podcast is about to become the next big soccer show." And I hope that he's right, and I just wanted to shout him out really quickly. Thank you for that, my guy, Andrew. I appreciate it. And if you are out there listening and you want to throw a review in there for me, you may just have it be read here on the podcast. So once again, thank you, Andrew. And so without further ado, let me kind of tell you the story of me going to college and playing college soccer. So to start at the beginning, I grew up in the capital region of New York. And for those of you who don't know, so the capital of New York actually is Albany. And so I live about 20 to 25 minutes away from Albany in a suburban sort of town. And growing up, I played youth for just kind of the town team until I got to high school. And I played high school soccer, and then I played for a premier, what was called at the time a premier club team. It was called Blackwatch Premier. One of the best clubs in the area. And it had a pretty good reputation of each year, each age group that was produced, that was going to be graduating, had a pretty good track record of sending a handful of players to the Division I level, and pretty high Division III level schools as well. In terms of the Division I kind of talent that was being produced, a lot of it was, maybe your smaller mid-major or small Division I schools, kind of like typically, a couple of players from the club each year would go to SUNY Binghamton or Colgate, which is a small private D1 school, and kind of that, I guess, caliber of school. Every now and then we would have a player go to a big time school from the club. I know one or two players went to like Virginia Tech one year, and we had some players go to Syracuse, a couple of kind of before Syracuse was a big time powerhouse in the country, and then even after that as well. So in my mind, I was sort of, I guess you could kind of say, delusional as a youth player playing for this club, because I thought, well, I'm here in this club, there's other players who go on to play Division I, so I'll just have that opportunity. And that is what I wanted to do. That's what I thought that I wanted, was to go on and play Division I soccer. And like I said, I just thought, well, I'm in the right spot, so it's going to happen. And I genuinely just didn't understand the full scope of what it means to play Division I and what it takes to get there, because like I said, I played for a quality club in this area, but I didn't have a concept of like, okay, you live in the capital region of New York, like there's like a handful, less than that, a handful of like quality clubs in this area. So you being a decent or even a great player here really means nothing in terms of the national landscape, which is what Division I college coaches are recruiting from. They're recruiting from huge regions of the country, if not the entire country, for those really big schools. I didn't even really fully grasp it until I got down to Philly and realized, like, there's high level clubs in bigger, more densely populated areas, they're a dime a dozen, and they are constantly producing high level players, which is why if you look at some of the top players that have been produced from our country, a lot of them come from areas where they were close enough to a big club, or there was a large density of quality clubs in an area. Like a lot of the best players that we've produced in our country come from actually as a matter of fact, the Philly, Jersey, like New York kind of region, like, and there's been a couple as well from like down in Florida, down near the more metropolitan areas, some in Texas as well. But I just considered myself being on one of the best clubs in my little area as that carrying some sort of weight, and it's not really until later on did I realize that it doesn't mean anything. And not to mention the fact too that even though my club had a good reputation and my club was good, the specific age group team that I was on was not very good. We struggled a lot, and we played at a high level in terms of the tournaments and leagues and stuff that we were in, but a lot of times we were just getting smashed because we weren't good. Because for whatever reason, most age groups at our club, the way it worked is all the best players from around the area would come play for our club. But for whatever reason, in my age group was one of the few age groups where it was very divided, and all the best players kind of split up, and some wanted to play for my club, some wanted to play for another club, and it was probably 3 clubs that they were split in between. And that it kind of diluted the talent pool of what each club was able to then send to these leagues and these events to represent like our area. You know, if we had sort of pulled together and formed one team, we probably would have been a much bigger force to be reckoned with, at the very least on the regional level, but not really the important part of the story. So, like I said, thinking in my head, okay, I'm going to have this Division 1 opportunity just placed in front of me, and didn't straight up, just to be honest with you, did not work hard enough to really merit a Division 1 opportunity. I can without a doubt tell you that right now. Like I said, I thought because I'm here, I'm in this club, I have these connections within this club, and I go to training 3 times a week, it's gonna happen. And just realized that wasn't gonna be the case. And I sort of started to then change my mindset and change my goals, and just sort of accept the fact that, okay, maybe Division 1 isn't really, as I didn't get any traction from the Division 1 perspective, started to think, okay, well, maybe I'll go Division 3, I'll go to a good Division 3 school, and I'll, enjoy my football, I'll get a good education, and I'll be fine with that. And honestly, at the time, I didn't really necessarily have a lot of issues or qualms with that. I was kind of okay with it. So I went through the Division 3 kind of recruiting process, and I went on some visits, and I was talking to coaches, and eventually it kind of got narrowed down to I was being recruited by a school called Endicott College, which is a Division 3 school. It's like a small private school just north of Boston. And I was also being recruited by another school in that same conference. I can't for the life of me remember what the name of the conference is, but I remember the other school was the University of New England. And Endicott College had a really beautiful campus. It's a pretty good soccer program. They had an amazing internship program where everybody who went to the school had to complete 3 internships by the time that they graduated. And I thought this would be the perfect spot for me. I was going to major in sport management. I was like, I'm near Boston. I can maybe, work for the Red Sox or the Patriots or something. You know what I mean? I thought this has everything that I need. And 2, at the time, the coach for Endicott was, I wouldn't say heavily recruiting me, but he was calling me like probably every other week and just checking in to see how I was. Once we kind of got to a more official place where I had been on a visit and I had expressed some more serious interest, and he had spoken to my club coach at the time, he was, like I said, he was calling me and checking in and seeing where I was at in the process, how school was going, how that's going. And was showing what I thought was genuine interest. So I continued with my senior year, still was thinking about it, probably in maybe, so this is probably in about then March or April of my senior year. I decide, okay, I'm going to go to Endicott and I'm going to commit. And so I call the coach, I tell him that I'm committing, he seems excited, and we kind of talk a little bit more as I come and do another, I think it was Accepted Students Day at the college, and talk more just about what preseason's going to look like, what just logistical type things of what to expect and how to get ready over the summer and all this type of stuff. And he was a super big into fitness guy. Like, he was also the strength and conditioning coach of the college, so he was super into like fitness testing. And I remember like we kind of spoke, and he more or less said, you know, the one big fitness test that I have is everybody has to run a mile in 5:15, which is, for any of you who know, is absolutely rapid. And he kind of said, okay, you know, if you can run it in 5:15, you know, I've seen you play, I've talked to your coach, that's going to kind of be the barometer. As long as you can come in fit and ready to go, we'll be good to go for the season. So I'm like, cool, you know. I spent the rest of the summer just trying to train, obviously, on my football, but I wanted to get this 5:15 mile. And it is hard, man. It is so hard to run a 5:15 mile. I worked, and eventually I got it down to, I think the lowest I got it down to before I actually stepped on campus was like a 5:27, 5:26, and I you know, sprinted across the finish line and effectively collapsed because it was everything that I had. So I was nervous going into it. I'm like, I don't even have this 5:15 yet, but I'm like, okay, well, the adrenaline and the competition of running it with the other guys who are coming into preseason, maybe that will kind of take me over the edge. So I go into preseason in August. I show up, and literally the first day, we kind of all are having like our first meeting, and there's a lot of guys here. I remember it's the first thing that I'm thinking. And turns out there's 40 of us there. And as you know, there is no college program in the country that will carry 40 guys on a roster. So I'm like, what's going on here? Basically, it's like we show up and he's like, yep, there's 40 dudes here. This is a straight up tryout. Like, I don't care if you're a senior, I don't care if you're an incoming freshman, I'm picking the best, I don't know, 27 or 25 or something like that to be on the roster. I don't care if you were heavily recruited, I don't care about any of that. And I'm like, yo, what? Like, I'm kind of taken aback, and I don't know, you know, is this sort of posturing? Is this just kind of like a thing that he's saying to scare everybody, or is this genuinely what it was? So he says, you know, we're going to go about 3 or 4 days, and we'll start the preseason. And then if we aren't interested in you, then after that 4th day, we're gonna let you know. And then the difficult thing about that too is if you're let go, so to speak, or you're cut on that 4th day, you then have to go back home, like pack up all your stuff, go back home, because we were staying in a temporary dorm just for preseason, and then everyone was going to move into their permanent academic residence for the year once preseason was over and once the school year started. So if you got cut in the beginning there, you would have to go home, wait the like week and a half, 2 weeks to then come back to school for actual school when classes were going to start, orientation was going to start. So I go, first thing we do, of course, is the mile. And I get 5:15 on the nose. And I hit it exactly. And I guess what I had told myself was right, that the adrenaline of being there, the competition, and having other people to pace you was going to carry me literally right to that precipice, and I hit it. So then in my head, I feel a little bit more comfortable because I'm like, okay, that was the one, that was the one barometer, that was the one metric that I knew, according to him, that I needed to hit. So then we've moved forward into the preseason. I feel like I'm doing well. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it was years ago as well, but from what I remember, I felt like I fit in. Sure, there were moments where I was a freshman coming to college for the first time. I need to adjust to the level. Like, very rarely are you going to have a freshman that's going to come in and just dominate and boss the game from the moment they step foot on campus. So I felt uneasy for sure, because I didn't know what was going to happen, but I felt comfortable enough. Fast forward to the kind of day of reckoning that they had laid out, that they were going to let people know. Brings me into his office and says, hey, listen, Brendan, I was really excited about bringing you in. I was speaking to your club coach, and I really thought you were going to be a big part of this program moving forward, but just don't think that you're going to be a part of the program. Don't think that you're going to be moving forward with us. And I was devastated, heartbroken. I mean, this is a big decision, one of the biggest decisions that you make in your life, where you decide to go to college, where you decide to study, and I wanted soccer to be a part of that. I know there's hundreds and thousands of kids out there who the sport that they play has been ingrained in their life for so long, and they want to continue to pursue that when they get to college. And I was one of those kids, right? I wanted to have both, and I was crushed when I found out it wasn't going to be the case. So, like I said, the worst part about that whole thing was, I left the office and I found a spot where I could, away from everybody on campus, and I remember just bawling, like legit just bawling my eyes out, because I'm like, well, what do I do now? What? I just had so many questions, and I didn't even really know what to say or what to think. And then had to go up, pack all your stuff, like in the same building where all these other guys who are still on the team are staying. Like, it's just embarrassing. And you've got to pack all your stuff. Then my family had to drive out the 3.5 hours to come pick me up, load up all my stuff, and then go home. And so I still went to Endicott and was just a student there for the full year as a freshman. It was fine. I mean, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't necessarily say that there's anything incredibly wrong with the school. I made some good friends there. I enjoyed some of the classes that I took, but on the whole, I was genuinely just really unhappy. I didn't have the sport that I loved anymore. I didn't always necessarily felt like I fit in with a lot of the people that were at school there. And I kind of struggled to socialize outside of the context of the sport that I played my entire life, just to be blatantly honest with you. I was working out, like going to the gym just kind of like 3 days a week. I started to put on a little bit of weight because my whole life I had just kind of banked off of the metabolism that I had and the training that I was doing playing soccer. So when I started to have more control over whatever it was that you could eat at the dining hall and only working out a couple times a week, like I maybe put on like 5-10 pounds, like, which I mean isn't a lot, but when you're used to staying relatively skinny and being a high level athlete, you notice like differences. And more towards the end of the school year, the academic year, I really just I started to call my mom a lot more and talk to her, and I was just like, I am not that happy here, and I really miss the game, and I think that's probably the biggest root of my unhappiness, is why I'm not thriving here, is because like my whole life I kind of maybe in a way found my identity through this game, you know? And so to have that ripped away from you like that, it, in a smaller sense, I almost felt like I was having like an identity crisis and trying to figure out exactly who I was and how to then be, be a person in this world without the game that I love. So I started thinking about any way to try and do something. I was emailing coaches to see like if I could transfer, but I knew that was going to be incredibly difficult to do, having not played any collegiate ball for a year. I even considered honestly kind of going in reverse and going to a prep school for a year. A lot of times students after high school who aren't quite ready to make that jump to college, typically like from an athletic standpoint, will do a prep year. So I know that there was a school that I was in contact with about maybe going to do that, and I was considering the junior college, community college route as well. And I was just trying to figure out a way to maybe change my situation and change my mindset. I also have thought about this in the past as well, is that I talked about why I wanted to tell this story in sort of reverse chronological order, right? Like I told you about me going to Germany and me after I'd graduated college, what that looked like. But I didn't tell you about the college part, and I think it kind of goes to show you a little bit of what I had to overcome just off this first bit right here. And like I said before, get the popcorn ready because we ain't done yet. But I had a whole year basically, in a pretty peak year in terms of a soccer player's development, where I didn't play. Like I wasn't training, I wasn't playing, I wasn't doing anything. I had a whole year. It's like a gap in my resume that is just blank. And so obviously I didn't have to start back at square one once I started playing the game again, but there were definitely deficits to my game that I had to then work even harder to get back up to a high level or an even higher level. And I still kind of fight with that every day to try and continue to, and it's interesting to me, you can't go back and change anything, but it's interesting to me to think about, if I had a full year there where I'd actually still played the game, would I be even farther ahead right now? I don't know. And I think there's ways to look at it where, yeah, maybe I would have been farther ahead from a soccer perspective, but there's also ways to think about it where maybe I wouldn't still be pursuing the game on a professional scale, and I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. I may not have gained the motivation after all the trials and tribulations that I'm about to describe to you if I hadn't gone through each and everything that I had gone through to get to now. And before I move on to tell you kind of about what I ended up deciding to do, let me just throw out a quick piece of advice to anyone who is involved in college recruiting process at all, is looking to go to college, that type of thing. Just be wary, more specifically with Division III programs, because there are some programs that are known to do this. Just be wary about what a coach is telling you, and understand that this is a two-way transaction almost between you and the coach. Yes, the coach is trying to fill his roster with the best players that he can, the best student athletes that he can, but this is also a major decision for you as the student athlete, picking where you want to go to school. So the biggest thing that I would say, and that I regret and wish I had done differently, is ask your coaches the tough questions that you want to know the answers to, because you're committing a huge amount of time, money, and emotional energy into making this decision. So, for me, a type of question like, what is the preseason tryout process really like? And find out that type of information. Find out, is this the type of thing where I'm being recruited to come in and be a starter, a reserve player, and your roles are obviously going to change as you move through your college career, or am I just being recruited to come in and be is this a walk-on tryout for me? Is there a chance that I might not be on this team? Like, all of those things play a factor into making your decision, especially if you value the soccer component of it very much, and when you're picking a school. If I had been told, I had an offer from University of New England and I had an offer from Endicott, and had I known Endicott's was going to be, you're just coming in and it's a tryout and there's a chance you might not make the team, versus University of New England, who maybe was going to say, no, you're a part of this team as soon as you commit because we want you to be a part of this team. Like, there's a distinct difference between those things, and sometimes a coach isn't going to come right out and tell you that, even though they should. And that's just the unfortunate reality of college soccer today. Is there's good people in it and there's bad people, like with any industry, and there's people who are going to be upfront with you and people who are going to be dishonest and deceitful. And because if you think about it, me coming to Endicott, and regardless of whether I play soccer or not, I've enrolled, and I'm paying tuition. You understand? So they've fulfilled their bottom line in a sense by getting me through the door. They don't necessarily have that obligation to then fulfill my wants and desires of trying to play for the team. So, I look back at it now. Am I upset? Not anymore. No. Was I upset at the time? Absolutely. But no harm, no foul. Like I said in previous episodes, I try and take ownership of it all on myself and just say, you know what, I wasn't good enough, didn't perform when I went to the tryout, so it is what it is. But I just want to say to those of you out there who are maybe going to find yourself in a similar position to me, is just be cognizant of that, is that it can happen, and try and do everything in your power to do the research beforehand so you know exactly what situation you're going to. So as I digress a little bit, let me get you back to where we're at. So I had just finished my freshman year at Endicott College, where I hadn't played. I had been cut from the team in the fall preseason, and I hadn't played for an entire year, and I was starting to be really unhappy and struggling, and was trying to find a way to maybe continue playing soccer again. Because that's honestly just all I wanted. Like, I started to think I was a little bit crazy, I was seeing players who weren't, who I didn't feel were at the same level as me, playing at Division III programs or Division II programs or wherever the case may be. And I started to think in my head, I'm like, I can play at this level. Like, I'm not a madman. Like, there is a place for me somewhere in the collegiate game. And so I go into the summer, and I'm trying to find where that place is for me. I kind of decided that maybe the prep, going kind of in reverse, the prep school route wasn't really going to be the best idea because it was going to be so expensive. And from an academic perspective, I'd be kind of going in reverse, and I wouldn't really be getting college credits on my transcript. There wasn't really too much traction in terms of any NCAA Division I, II, or III coaches who were looking at somebody who hadn't played competitively the previous year. So I sort of settled on deciding that I was going to go to a community college, and I had narrowed it down to two: the one in my hometown or in my area, which was Hudson Valley Community College, or a school called Tompkins Cortland Community College, which is right out in Dryden, New York, in between Cortland and Ithaca. I had emailed both the coaches. Both of them had kind of said, as with most community college programs, that, yep, there's spots for you if you want to come. The decision was kind of made for me when I learned that at Tompkins Cortland, I could still study sport management. At Hudson Valley, I couldn't. And also at Tompkins Cortland, I would still be living off campus, which I felt like was going to be a positive thing for my kind of growth just as a young person, versus Hudson Valley, I would be living at home just because it was so close to home. It didn't make sense to go and live on campus. So I go and I visit Tompkins Cortland kind of late in the summer. And actually at the time, I think I had heard something initially from the Tompkins Cortland coach, but then I didn't hear anything for a long stretch of time. So I didn't know maybe if there wasn't really room for me anymore. So kind of at a last ditch type thing, and maybe like July, early August even, I was like, hey, you know, I know we were speaking before, is there still a spot for me? Coach Andy Davis, my guy, eventually gets back to me and is like, yep, sorry, you know, we do still have room if you want to come out. So I remember it came down to like the very last minute when I finally made the decision, because it was a big decision for me. Like, anyone who's listening, transferring is a huge decision to make. And I know I'm going to tell you about a lot of different transfers that I made in this story, but understand that it's not something that I just take lightly, and it's not something that you should take lightly, because it's a difficult process and there's a lot that goes into it and there's a lot of work that's involved. So for me, I was stressed because, you know, I had chosen Endicott. Like I said, I had started to make some friends there. I was 1 year into the academic program there, and although I didn't necessarily feel the happiest and that I always fit in, I felt like I had grown somewhat comfortable there. So it was tough to just leave that and go to a complete unknown. I was moving out into the middle of like Bumble, New York, and I didn't know a single person there, and I was going to try and play soccer. But I thought about it and I thought about it, and I wound up making the decision that the soccer aspect was just too important for me, and I needed to pursue this. And I would always look back and think, what if I had not chosen to leave Endicott and go and play soccer again? And it was just so overpowering that I knew I just couldn't push it off, and I couldn't turn it off and leave it to the side, this burning desire to want to play again. I remember I was even struggling to make this decision so much because, like I said, I was nervous about it, and I normally, when I ever ask my family or close friends about decisions, if they are in disagreement with me, that can often play a pretty big role in my decision making. And there's been times where I've changed my mind because my family doesn't agree with what I'm doing. But I remember this was one time where I was asking my mom, what should I do, Mom? What should I do? What should I do? And for the longest time, she was like, I can't answer this for you. You know, I know you want me to answer it for you, but I can't be the one to make this decision. It's too big. And I was like, I know, but just come on, you know, just help. And so finally, she was like, honestly, if I had to make it and it's not my decision to make, I would probably go back to Endicott because, you know, it's a good academic program. You have some friends there. It's known to you. And so I sat on that for a couple days, and I couldn't get the soccer part out of my head, honestly. And so this was like the first time where I had ever, you know, my mom said, this is what I think you should do. And I went the other way, and I said, I'm actually going to do the opposite. So probably 2 weeks before preseason started in Cortland, I told the coach, yep, I'm coming. And I remember I didn't even tell Endicott, the school, yet that I wasn't returning until I went to Cortland and I had the preseason, and it was confirmed that I was going to be on the team because I didn't want to go through the same process again of going to a school, trying out and getting cut again, and then being like, okay, well, now I'm in the middle of Bumble and I don't know anybody here, and you know, I might as well just go back to Endicott if I didn't have soccer. So I go, I try out, make the team, tell Endicott that I'm withdrawing from the school, and now I am a student athlete at Tompkins Cortland Community College, otherwise known as TC3. So I go there for what was my first year. It's kind of technically my freshman year at TC3, and almost instantaneously, everything starts to click again. and I fall back in love with the game, and I'm happy, and I'm making friends there. But it felt different than Endicott, you know, because these are like, I'm friends with my teammates, and I just feel comfortable again. I feel like I'm back into my identity, you know, where as a big part of my identity, I identify as a soccer player. So I was loving it, you know. I felt like I was really having the full college experience that I wanted, even though I was at a community college. And even the social aspects, you know, the partying, the hanging out with friends, those kind of things in college, they felt more natural while I was a part of this team than they did when I was back at Endicott. So I go that first year, we have a pretty decent year. We got knocked out in the first round of playoffs, and we wrap up the season, and I'm just buzzing, you know what I mean? I'm happy to be back doing what I love, and I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, well, I have 2 years now. I was pretty close to an associate's degree with all the credits that I had, and I could have tried to transfer to go to a 4-year institution, finish up my bachelor's degree. But I spoke it over with my coach, I spoke it over with some of my teammates, and I was like, let's come back for one more season, one more go around. I'll try and do really well, and then in the spring, after my sophomore season at TC3, I will try and transfer to a school, because maybe that will give me a bit of a leg up in terms of coming into a NCAA program if I come in the spring, because I'll get in before, you know, all the freshmen and transfers come in for preseason in the fall, and I'll get to train with them in the spring and get acclimated to the university. So that was the plan, right? I finished the first year, and then I'm going to do a half year, finish up, get my associates. I had I think 3 classes left to finish, and then I took a 4th one just because I needed to have 12 to be able to play sports, and it was such a fun semester, just playing and living with some really good friends of mine. We lived in a house in Cortland, and it was a lot of fun. It was the college lifestyle epitomized. Leading up into that sophomore season, I had really dedicated myself back into the sport. I was training a ton on my own. I went out, and there was a guy who would train athletes in the gym, and I went out and worked with him a couple times a week all the way through the off season. I got way stronger, way faster. So I was pumped. To come in and do this sophomore season. So I come in and I do this sophomore season, and it didn't go as well from the soccer perspective. In terms of our team having a better record, we were slightly worse record-wise, although it still kind of boggles my mind to this day, because I felt like we had a probably overall more talented team. But we still wind up going to playoffs. We played a team called SUNY Adirondack at their field, which was on a hill, and it was bumpy and a super windy day, and these guys just played kickball, and it was so physical and choppy, and it wound up that we lost on some interesting refereeing decisions, to say the least. But nonetheless, it was an abrupt end to the season that we were kind of frustrated about, and honestly, the game wound up in a almost fist fight in the parking lot. It was crazy. It's still one of the craziest games I've been a part of to this day. But I've completed my associate's degree, and I have completed my eligibility as a junior college soccer player. But like I said, that hunger and that passion is back. You know, I love the game again, and kind of a small part of me had gone into TC3 thinking, well, this is just a chance for me to kind of see out something that I had always wanted to do in my life, play college soccer. So maybe if I just get it kind of out of my system, I'll be okay to move on with my life. And that just wasn't the case. I fell back in love with it again, and I needed to find an opportunity to finish out my college career, and I needed to find an NCAA school so that I could go get my bachelor's degree and I could keep playing. So I put a highlight video together of some clips from both years, and I start to email coaches and ask if I can transfer in. And like I said, my plan was to transfer in the spring so that could give me a little bit of a leg up. I could train with the team in their spring season, get adjusted to the university, get adjusted to the team, and then go into the fall. And it was kind of frustrating because I didn't really get a lot of traction in terms of any offers. Just didn't maybe I wasn't really emailing the right schools, maybe my search wasn't the best, but whatever the case may be, didn't get a lot of love sent my way. I wound up getting an email from SUNY Cortland, which is right in that same town, and a pretty prominent Division III program in terms of the country. They're a SUNY school, so it's a very competitive league, and they had said, yeah, you can come in and train with us in the spring, and we can see where you're at, and then we can maybe go into the fall. And I didn't have any other opportunities, honestly, except for one that came in very last minute, which is kind of an interesting tie-in. I had eventually didn't get anything, decided, yep, I'll go to SUNY Cortland. I'm like, it's still going to be great. I'm still going to be around everybody that I just finished community college with. I'm going to be in the same town, get to go to SUNY Cortland and play. And then in December, after I had already committed to Cortland, I got an email back from a school I was speaking to called Wilmington University in Delaware, which is in the CAC, which is in the same conference as Chestnut Hill, which for those of you who know is the school that I wound up going to. I had a friend who I had played community college with at TC3 who was at Wilmington, spoke to the coach. I had spoken to the coach very briefly. I had spoken to my friend, and eventually, like I said, last minute December, the coach had emailed me and said, hey, we don't have any scholarship money, but you can come in as a walk-on and be a part of the team. I was like, had this offer come in months ago, I probably would have snapped it up, but I had already chosen Cortland. So I was like, thank you so much, but I've already made my decision. As I continue to tell the rest of this story, you'll find how interesting this turns out to be, and how it's funny to me how all these little things happen and things can change in an instant, really. Like it's just kind of wild, the game of football, and how much it changes and how everyone's story unfolds. But I went to Cortland in the spring. As I said, the coach had initially said, yeah, you can come and you can train with us in the spring. So I go and I have a couple meetings with the coach, and eventually it gets right up to where they're about to start spring season, and all of a sudden I get an email and he says, hey, I just spoke to the athletic director, and actually it's not going to be able to work out. You're not going to be able to train with us in the spring for whatever reason. I can't remember now at the time what it was. So I'm like, okay, like I'm bummed, but at the same time, like, will there still be a chance to like come in the fall? And he's like, yeah, we'll have you come in for preseason in the fall. So it actually kind of worked out where in that spring and that summer, I was training with a semi-professional team with the coach from TC3. He was one of the coaches for it, called Greater Binghamton Football Club, GBFC. They played in the NPSL. So I was training with this team, and they set up a friendly day with SUNY Cortland one day in the spring. So I had been speaking with the coach of SUNY Cortland, and he had said, okay, that will be a really good opportunity for me to evaluate you, and we can see about what we're going to do in the fall. So I played this match with GBFC against SUNY Cortland, felt like I did all right, have the conversation after with the SUNY Cortland coach, and he says, hey, I think you're an okay player, but just I think physically you're not quite at the level for what we're looking for, and what I can do is I can offer you a one-day walk-on tryout 2 weeks into the preseason in the fall. And I'm like, once again, I'm crushed. I'm like, yo, how did this happen again? How am I in the same exact situation as I was a few years ago? I thought I've come farther than this. Because for those of you who don't know, the odds of you making a team from a one-day walk-on tryout after a coach has already had his players in for a 2-week preseason is effectively slim to none. You have to absolutely come in and wow him and be above and beyond anything like that he could have imagined to show up at this walk-on tryout. Because think about it, if I come in, I'm 2 weeks behind everyone that you've just been working with, and I have 1 day to showcase my ability. 1 day where you just had everyone in your preseason for 2 weeks that you watched day in and day out. So I'm like, well, that's effectively a no-go. But I remember I was kind of defeated at that point. I remember I spoke to my mom and my sister, and I was like, prior to this conversation happening, I said, I'll try and I'll play for SUNY Cortland, and even if it doesn't work out, this is a pretty good school. I'll just get my degree and I'll be okay with it. I had my experience at TC3, but I guess it just wasn't meant to be for me to be able to play college soccer. I have that conversation with the coach. He says effectively, no, we're not interested. And I'm devastated again. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to play college soccer. This really sucks. And then I kind of had a glimmer of hope. Once again, maybe I'm a crazy person, maybe I'm naive, and I just kept telling myself, I'm like, I am not crazy to think that there's somewhere for me to be able to play in this country. There's I am a collegiate level player. I just know it. And I didn't want the story to end like this. I couldn't accept it. So I had been speaking to a friend who was still going to Tompkins Cortland, who he had transferred to our school in his sophomore year. He's from London, England, my guy DSG, and we had played together. We had become pretty close, and he was looking to go and get his bachelor's degree and find a school for him to play at. And he said, I have this friend, he goes to a school in Philadelphia called Chestnut Hill. I think I'm going to go visit him, talk to the coach a little bit, and see if maybe there's something in there. Division II school in the CAC. So I asked him some more questions about it and what the school was like, and after he had gone, I asked him about it, and I was like, what the hell? I'll send an email. Send an email to the coach, and the coach gets back to me and is interested. And it's like, yeah, I think we could bring you in, and this could be a real opportunity for you if you want it. So I'm like the light bulb starts to flash in my eyes again. I'm like, okay, maybe it's not so far out of the question. Maybe I do really have a chance here. I am a student at SUNY Cortland at the time. This is still in the spring semester. Like I said, I'm not playing. But now I'm talking to this school in Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia, and it's looking like maybe there's an opportunity there. Then, out of the blue, a former coach of mine messages me and says, hey, I know you were at community college. Have you found a school to transfer to yet? And I was like, no, not exactly. I'm kind of here at Cortland, but it didn't work out with soccer, blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, I know pretty well the new guy who just got hired at a college called St. Rose, another Division II program in the NE10. And as a matter of fact, it's actually in Albany, New York, which is right in my neck of the woods. And he was like, I can put in a good word for you and see what comes of it. And I said, sure, why not? He does, and eventually I get a phone call from this coach at St. Rose, and he's showing genuine interest. And things kind of progress with both coaches, and eventually both of them are kind of like, yeah, we'd like to bring you in. This is Chestnut Hill and this is St. Rose. So this is why I say the game of football is insane, and it's funny how it can change so quickly. I went cut from a Division III program, went to community college, tried to walk on to another Division III program, was cut again. Fast forward a few months later, I now have 2 Division II offers for scholarship on the table. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do with myself. I'm through the moon. Then I guess I had gotten too big for my britches at the time, because I got hit with yet another setback. I get this message from the coach at Chestnut Hill, and he's like, hey, there might be something a little bit up with your eligibility when you come to us. Is asking me about the schools that I've been to, my transcripts, and where I've transferred from. And so I'm telling him about it, and eventually he speaks to the head of compliance at his school. And then kind of in the meantime as well, St. Rose is starting to have this same conversation with me. And there's starting to be kind of like red flags of like, maybe there's an issue in terms of my eligibility. Even though I've only played soccer at one school and it was a community college, I've now, for those of us counting, have been to 3 schools. So eventually I get the phone call from the coach at Chestnut Hill, and he says, yeah, we just found out that if you were to come, you would be athletically ineligible for the first year due to the transfer rules. And honestly, to this day, I still don't totally understand the transfer rule that forced me to sit out for an entire year. But basically, because of the fact that even though I'd only played soccer at one school at a junior college, because of the fact that I had that many transfers on my transcripts and stuff like that, I wasn't going to be allowed to play immediately when I arrived at Chestnut Hill or St. Rose, had I chosen to go there. So again, I'm like crushed. I'm like, okay, I finally had the opportunities, but now they're telling me that I have to sit out for an entire year. And as it is, you know, this was going into when I went to Chestnut Hill. That was going to be my 4th year of college. So I probably could have gotten a degree very shortly thereafter. So I'm like, well, that's going to be the 1 year maybe for me to play, unless I choose to do an extra semester or choose to do more time at the school. So I'm like, well, what do I do? Like, I was so frustrated, you know, because I had genuine interest from these coaches. I went through the process the right way this time. You know, I sat down with the coach, Jules Fernandez, my guy at Chestnut Hill, and still a good friend of mine to this day. And I said to him, you know, if I come to your school, what does that look like for me from a soccer perspective? I went to a school previously, a Division III school, where they told me all these things that I wanted to hear, and then they cut me and left me out to dry. And he was like, yep, that's typical of what a lot of Division III coaches do. He was like, I am bringing you in to be a part of my team. You will be part of the preseason. There won't be a tryout for you. Same thing with St. Rose. I had the same conversation with him. Coach Ciano over there, who I, again, have a pretty good relationship still to this day with. And then I was speaking to both of them and saying, you know, I have offers from each one of you guys, and each one of them said to me, well, you know, before you make any decision, like, come talk to me. I want you to be here. I want you to be a part of our program, and there may be some scholarship involved that I can make work for you to get you through the door. So I'm having these conversations, and then I get hit with this news of, yeah, you're going to have to sit out for an entire year. And that also means that all those scholarships are taken off the table. Luckily, I still have both of them saying, yes, you can still come in and be a part of the program, because some schools might have just said, you know, we're not looking to come in and have a red shirt. Both of them had still said, yes, we'd like for you to come and be a part of our program. Now it's up to you to make the decision. So I poured over this decision for such a long time. And I reached out to a lot of people for advice. I tried desperately to get a hold of the NCAA and just trying to explain my situation. I'm like, I'm not just transferring for no apparent reason. I'm not just transferring because, I fell out with a coach or something, or I just am changing my major every 5 minutes. Like, I'm just trying to play the sport I love. That's it. And I can't seem to find that opportunity anywhere. And again, I kind of thought to myself, well, I can go to Chestnut Hill, or I can go to St. Rose and just train for a whole year, or I can go back to Cortland where I was at, not train or play soccer at all, and just be a student. And honestly, probably fall in with some of the wrong types of things to be doing, and maybe, Cortland is a big party school, so I probably would have just got wrapped up in that. And I thought, what is going to make me the happiest? And I finally just concluded, even if I'm not playing, even just being a part of that team, like I said at TC3, being a part of that environment again, and being around teammates and working towards a goal, that's what I want to be a part of. That's what makes me happy, and all that other stuff that college is quote unquote supposed to be about, it's not all that to me, and I can get that anywhere, and I'd rather go and try and do something with this passion than let it fall to the wayside. And again, it was don't go 10 years down the road and think, what if? So I eventually made the decision to go to Chestnut Hill. I go with my boy, DSG, and that was probably a big reason why I did decide to go to Chestnut Hill, because he was going as well. He had become really one of my best friends while we were at TC3, and even though we were both, moving to Philly for the first time, and we didn't really know what to expect, it was something that I felt more comfortable doing because I had a friend by my side to kind of figure it out. And as it unfortunately turned out for him, he was actually going to be ineligible that first year as well, due to some issues with the credits from his transcript. He needed one class to be eligible, but he didn't yet have it, so he had to take that class first before he was able to play. And before I move on here too, let me just also give a quick piece of advice to any of you youngsters out there, is try and be as professional and as considerate as possible when you're in the recruiting process with any coach that you're speaking to. And even if they don't always necessarily give you the same courtesy, try, and to the best of your ability, hold yourself to a high standard and treat every coach with respect. Because I look back and I'm frustrated with myself because I didn't handle the situation of choosing Chestnut Hill and not going to St. Rose the best way. I was speaking to both of the coaches, and eventually when I chose Chestnut Hill, I just didn't give Coach Ciano over at St. Rose a call. And he had messaged me a couple times, and I was too nervous, and I'd never been in this situation before where two coaches were really wanting me like that, and so I didn't know how to handle it. And I know that that's a cop-out, and that sounds cowardly, and to be honest, it is. It's not the way that you should handle it, and it's not the way that I should have handled it. So let me give that as a piece of advice, in that if you wind up choosing a school, make sure that you let the other coaches know that you've been speaking to, that you've made your decision, and thank them for the recruiting process, and try and handle it in as much of a stand-up way as you can. Luckily, I now still have a relationship with Coach Ciano, because once I graduated college, there was a period of time where we kind of talking back and forth about me maybe joining the staff for him to coach at St. Rose, and that's kind of, we've had some talks about that on and off in the past few years, and I've spoken to him, and I've apologized for that exact story that I've just told you, and so we're in a better place now, and we can speak to each other. But that's something that I would definitely recommend to anyone in the recruiting process from a student athlete perspective is try and handle that differently than the way I did. Anyway, we are now to the point of the story where I've been to Endicott, left, went to TC3, finished out my time there, graduated, went to SUNY Cortland, more heartbreak, left SUNY Cortland. I've showed up at Chestnut Hill College. It's an NCAA Division II institution. I'm at the place where I wanted to be, where I've dreamed of for years, and I'm told you're going to have to sit out for an entire year and you can't play in matches. You can only train. So I go and I do that, and it taught me so much about myself. It taught me to be humble. It taught me how to work hard. It taught me a lot about growing up, because I lived in an off-campus apartment that I had to sort out, and I had to figure out who I was going to be living with, and I had roommates from all over the world come and live with me, and this was too one of the first times where I started to play with guys from literally all over the world. I experienced it a little bit at TC3, but now to this point in time in my life, I've had teammates from almost every point on the globe that you can picture. So it was an amazing experience for me, and as well, being in a city like Philadelphia, it opened my eyes to so much more culturally and socially, and I had the soccer perspective. I was in an environment where I was training, there were quality players there, and I was just working to try and become the best soccer player that I could, and I was loving it. Even though I wasn't playing matches, and of course that was frustrating, but I was a part of it, even if it was a small part. And again, I'm making more friends, and I really feel like this is a place that's kind of becoming home for me. So obviously this is now my 4th year of college, but I didn't want to have my swan song and the culmination of my career end with 1 year where I just trained and didn't play matches. As it turned out, I needed a couple more classes to graduate anyway, and I wanted to have that 1 year where I was an NCAA Division II player. So I wound up doing 4.5 semesters of college. I tacked a little one on there at the end. And actually leading up into the season, I had kind of another roadblock. In the spring, we had thought maybe I could be able to play, myself and DSG, who, as I mentioned before, we were both ineligible, couldn't play in the spring either. It had to be a full academic year where we sat out. So we're still sitting out. We get to the end of the spring season, and my guy, Julian Fernandez, comes, talks to us, and he says, "Hey fellas, so I've actually accepted a job as the assistant coach at Temple University." So I'm like, oh man, the guy who recruited me to come here and wanted me to be a part of this program, and the guy who now has seen me train for an entire year and is talking about having me be an integral part of the team going forward because he likes my ability, he's now gone. And selfishly, it's not really about me, but I'm frustrated because he's leaving. I'm happy on the one hand that he got this opportunity, although, and I don't know, maybe he'll be listening to this, but although him and I can both agree that opportunity didn't wind up being everything that he thought it was going to be, but that's neither here nor there. So we go into the summer now, and we're looking for a new head coach, and we wound up choosing this guy, Zach Sabatendira, and I'm kind of now in this position where I'm back at square one. I have to grind this summer, and I need to impress this guy coming in. And sure, he's good friends with Julian. Julian kind of groomed him and had a good input in putting him up for this position. And Julian has talked me up a little bit, but I need to make sure that this guy his first impression of me is good, and that I can be an integral part of this team and achieve all those things that I want to achieve once I get into the team. You know, can I be a starter? Can I do all these different things? So I spent that summer, that rest of that spring semester and that summer, I was living in Philly, kind of on and off, spending usually a couple days a week in Philadelphia, a couple days a week in New York, because I was working 2 different jobs, which was a crazy time, and that's a story for another day. But I was working at a internship in Philadelphia, just outside of Philadelphia, 4 days a week, and then I would get in the car, drive 3 hours home, and work at the town pool in my hometown as the manager. And I would do that every single week, and it was madness. And then I would drive after the 3 days back to Philly and just keep doing it. So I'm doing that all the while I'm training as much as I can, trying to get ready. And I also have a conversation with Julian, who the full transition of him leaving the university, Chestnut Hill College, and Zach coming into the position was kind of slated more towards when preseason was going to start for Chestnut Hill. So Julian was still on campus and was still kind of in that position, and I went and I had a conversation with him, and I was like, you know, I know that I didn't play last season. I know that you got a lot of guys who have come in and had this same conversation with you about scholarship money, but I know we had talked about before me coming, there maybe being scholarship on the table, and I'm just wondering, you know, is there still a possibility of anything like that to help me and my family out with this tuition? And I remember he said that he could offer me a $1,000 scholarship per semester, so $2,000 in total. And in the grand scheme of things, and honestly, to those of you who are listening, that's probably nothing. But for me, coming from everything that I've just laid out for you in the past hour, of being cut from a Division III program, not playing for an entire year, playing for a community college in the middle of Bumble, finding the love again, trying to find another opportunity for myself to play, getting turned down and rejected at every door, going to SUNY Cortland, being told, no, you're not good enough for this team either, leaving SUNY Cortland, moving to an entire different state and city, not knowing anybody except for my one friend, DSG, living with people who I'd never met before in my life, guys from Brazil and from Jamaica, and having a whirlwind of a first year, not being able to play in matches that first year, finding out that I'm ineligible, just training all year, feeling like a part of the team, but in one sense, you know, I'm not traveling to the away games, I'm not playing in the matches, I'm not doing the things that really kind of earn you that respect from your teammates that you do in matches. The moment that he said to me that I was going to be a scholarship player, it was just everything that I had sacrificed so much for, everything that I had worked so damn hard to try and be, and it had finally come true. And I didn't even care that it was going to be one semester and it was going to be $2,000 and everybody else was on way more money. Like, I was a scholarship player at an NCAA Division II college, and this was a time where it was a whole different type of cry, you know, like, luckily Jules is still my guy to this day, but, and I didn't like bawl in front of him, but I got choked up for a second, and, you know, because I told him kind of what it took for me to get there in that seat in front of him, and him offer me that, and, you know, and then I went and I called my mom, and it still kind of brings me that feeling today of, you know, I called her and I told her, like, I did it after all the heartbreak and the difficulty and the sacrifice for the past 4 years. I am here, and I did what I set out to do. And it was incredible. And it was that first time of me so far in my soccer, not even the first time of me in my soccer career, but one of many times in my soccer career where I just refused to be denied, and I refused to be told that I couldn't do it, and I just kept going even when so many people did not believe that it was going to happen, when so many people did not think that I was going to get this opportunity, that it was ever going to be in the cards for me. And there were times, like I said, I stopped believing if I was ever even going to be at this point, you know? You kind of get kicked so many times, and you get told something so many times that you start to believe it. And I started to believe that maybe I really wasn't good enough. But that moment just encapsulated everything, all the hardship, all the pain, all the struggle, all the sacrifice, and it made it all worth it. So we're in the summer before that ninth little extra semester there that I snuck in there just at the buzzer for myself to play college soccer. Like I said, we got a new coach coming in. It's another one of those things where I say, you know, everything happens for a reason. Like Zach, the new coach that came in, wound up being a great fit for me. I loved playing for him, and another guy who I still is probably one of the most influential people in my life right now, and is a huge mentor to me, and a huge factor in why I'm successful today. He pushed me and challenged me and asked a lot of me, and still does to this day, personally, professionally, from a soccer perspective. And so it was a really good fit for me for my last year, and I had a good season. It was unfortunate because there's always going to be sort of a learning curve for a new coach when they come into a program. And Zach was no different. He just needed a year to figure out exactly the guys that he had in his program to sort of shape and develop a philosophy and a system. So unfortunately we didn't make playoffs for my senior year, which would have been a nice kind of send-off, but it was still just, it was everything that I had hoped that it was going to be, and that I finally achieved that dream that I had set out for myself for so long. And that brings us to the end of my collegiate story. The rest you can go and check out if you kind of are picking these up in reverse order. I talk about in episode 2 and episode 3 what I did after I graduated college, and kind of bring you up to speed with what I'm doing now, because as you guys know, I'm currently trying to pursue a professional footballing career. I hesitate to say that I like sharing this story, or I like my story, because it was so difficult, and I wouldn't necessarily want to put somebody through that same kind of pain that I went through, which is why I kind of spoke before about making sure that if you want to transfer schools, as someone who practically wrote the book in transferring schools, make sure that it's for all the right reasons, and make sure that you've poured over the decision, because I knew there was, each time I transferred, a very specific reason why I was transferring. And even with that being said, it was such a difficult process. There were so many times where I finally got comfortable in a situation, and then I had to leave again. You know, I was comfortable in Cortland, and then I had to leave and go to Philly. And it was just this constant cycle of kind of maybe starting to find my own way, and maybe fitting in socially, and then just leaving, because this driving force inside of me, this want and this need to play soccer, it just wouldn't be denied, and it wouldn't let me do anything else. You know, I kind of think, I maybe even look at it in terms of my career now, I in a way, I sometimes felt as if I didn't really necessarily have control over it. It was just, I wanted to play college soccer with everything in my being that there wasn't almost an opportunity or a way for me to just be like, it's fine, like I'm just done. Like my body just wouldn't allow. And I know this might not make sense, but my body and my mind were just like, no, this is what you want and this is what you have to do. And it's kind of why I look the same way, like with my playing career now. Like I feel like there's not a way for me to stop until the wheels fall off. You know what I'm saying? I said I hesitate to say I like sharing this story, but at the same time, I like sharing this story, and I kind of wear it with a badge of honor across my chest, because it's like I know what it takes to struggle, and I know what it takes to sacrifice for something that you really want, and I understand what it really means to go through adversity to get somewhere, and to be told no and to be denied, and continue to just push and continue to just move forward even when the deck is stacked against you and there's doubters left and right. I understand that, and I value what that means for me to get to where I am today, which is why in a lot of ways I'm proud of myself. I had every opportunity under the sun to just say, you know what, man, maybe the universe is just telling me something, that I'm not really cut out to do this. But I just refused to listen, and I refused to stop, and I just continued to go. And it brings me inspiration to myself to this day. Like I still think back to how difficult it was and how much I went through to get to that point. And I still think back to it a lot about what it took for me to get there. And it's why I'm almost grateful for it, because it showed me what it was going to be like to overcome obstacles and hit adversity. And now I'm used to it, and I get faced with adversity now, and I don't fold, and I don't crack under the pressure. I just find a way to keep going. That's something that not a lot of people get the opportunity to experience. Not a lot of people get faced with that much, at the risk of sounding redundant, that much adversity. I said something in the very first episode that probably sounded confusing, but I still believe it to be true for myself, in that I don't regret anything. However, I probably would have done some things differently if given the opportunity. If I could go back and script it all again, the number one option, the number one choice for me to take would not be to go to 4 schools in 4 years. If I could go back and do it all again, I would have busted my butt in high school, done all the work, gotten into a Division I program in college, and stayed there for all 4 years and tried to become the best player that I could at that one specific college or university. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's not the way that I would pick if I could go back and pick it again. I wouldn't pick my route. However, with that being said, I don't regret anything, because every piece of my story and every aspect of it got me to where I am right now and where I am today. It challenged me, and it strengthened me, and it toughened me, and I don't know if I would be the exact same person that I am today if I didn't have to go through what I've been through. And not to mention, the people that I've met along the way have been such a incredible blessing that is interwoven in this story, that I can't possibly say that I regret any decision that I've made. I have lifelong friends from when I was in TC3. The guy that I told you about from Australia that I went down to visit, and the trial and all that type of stuff, that was from TC3. Obviously, I've just told you a little bit about DSG in this story from TC3, went to Chestnut Hill, met so many amazing people at Chestnut Hill that I'm still very close with to this day from all over the world. I can practically pick a place on the map and go somewhere, and I'll know somebody who I've played with in a specific country. And the coaching connections that I've now made, I introduced you guys a little bit to Coach Julian Fernandez and Zach Sabatendira, who are really influential and great people in my life. So I don't regret a single decision that I've made. But I want to share this story, and I've been excited to share this story in a platform like this, because I want you to take it for exactly what it is and understand a couple of things. One, understand that just because you're dealt a certain situation does not mean that that is your situation and that there's no way out of it. If you have the determination and the grit and the perseverance to change the hand that has been dealt to you and get out of your situation, you can do it. And I am proof of that. So if you feel like maybe the program that you're in is not the right fit for you for whatever reason, and you seriously have considered all the options and the factors, or you're in a similar position to me and you went to a school and it didn't work out from an athletic perspective, you're not boxed in, and there are options for what you can do moving forward. And take my story as one blueprint of maybe some of the things that you could choose to do. Secondly is understand, maybe as you listen to this, what are some of the things that you thought and you looked at and you said, well, that doesn't make sense why he did that. Well, that seemed kind of dumb. I probably wouldn't have done the same thing. And take those on board as well. That's just as important for you to listen to my story and think, honestly, I would have chosen that Wilmington offer when he had it instead of going to Cortland, or I would have done this, or I would have done that. There could be anything that you heard from me today that you think, that doesn't make sense, why did he do that? And apply it to your life, and don't make the same mistakes that I did. But I love sharing my story with people because it gives you an insight into kind of who I am as a person and the way I go about my business and what I truly care about. It shows you how much I am willing to sacrifice and give to this game that I love so much. And I hope it gives me a tiny bit of credibility as I try and continue to educate, inspire, motivate, wadatever the term may be, in this podcast for you guys. And there's certainly, that's the story of 4.5 years that I've just laid out for you over the span of probably an hour and a half. I'm certain that there's things that I've missed and that I've glossed over and maybe not gone into as much detail about, but that's sort of the story behind my 4.5 years in college, and why I say you can take something from everybody's story, because my story and my progression to trying to become a professional looks very, very different than the next guy, and it probably does not even look remotely like anyone that you know or anyone that you've seen get to the professional level. But I hope that you've enjoyed listening to my story. I have really enjoyed sharing it with you and giving you an even more insight into who this guy is that's on your microphone and in front of your camera. So once again, I want to say how thankful I am for the support that I've gotten thus far. I would continue to encourage you to show that love for me and follow the show, subscribe to the show, like, rate, review, all that kind of stuff. I think we're on just about every platform now where you can consume the content. So please make sure, if you know somebody who could benefit from a story like this, or if you just like the story and you think I'm a halfway decent storyteller, then tell somebody that you know about the podcast and share it with somebody. And I hope that I can continue to do some good with this, and I can continue to kind of share my story, and it can be something that you guys all enjoy. That about does it for me and my story for today. I will catch all you guys soon and talk to you later. Peace.